And at the end of the day, I don't.
Bro, look at him, bro. He looks so fed up.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
The presence of Nazis and white supremacists assaulting people at your protest. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I don't like Nazis.
And I'm sure, I would hope that if I were a student of Dr. Peterson, that he would refer to me as she and wouldn't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, you know, a personal pronoun preference still is a preference for what language other people use. And at the end of the day, I don't...
Bro, look at him, bro. He looks so fed up. He looks so fed up. Like, he's like, bro, why do I have to sit here and listen to this? Like, he looks pissed off just for the fact that this conversation is happening right now.
Preference for what language other people use. And at the end of the day, I don't have ultimate control over what Dr. Peterson, what the language he chooses to use, or anybody else for that matters. That's up to them.
Okay, let me find out then.
The problem arises.
Let me find out. If she were a student of yours, what would you call her?
She.
You would. Okay. We've established that.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
He has a point. I mean, if you really think about it, if the goal of communication was to not offend anybody, but that's just subjective. Like, let's say you don't like this video and you comment, oh, this video freaking sucks. I could just say that's offensive and have you removed from, I don't know, man. Y'all get what I'm saying. Like, communication is naturally, it's just offensive. If you have freedom of speech, it's just going to offend certain people. That's just what it is. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't be allowed to speak. You can still speak. You can still speak. You just have to offend some people. That's just what it is.
In the pursuit of truth, why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I have exercised my freedom of speech.
You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on. So and that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and... I'm just trying to work that out. I mean...
Ha, she looked confused.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head.
And there's not a secular humanist organization or country on the planet that has ever produced as a good thing, an intentional good thing, rapists and murderers. So.
Well, that's highly debatable. That's highly debatable.
Actually,
I mean, one of the things
absolutely true because there's never been a secular humanist government on the planet.
I don't know. I think the Soviets were pretty secular.
No, they.
What? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, I hate when people try to demonize the American government as if it's just the worst thing to ever exist. Everyone knows that's not true. That's just an idiotic take. And I'm not trying to be pro-America. Yeah, America. I'm just being like, it's a cool government. Like, it's nothing. It's one of the best governments in the world, if I'm being completely honest. And trying to sit here and demonize it just shows your lack of understanding of what's happening in other places in the world.
Government on the planet.
I don't know. I think the Soviets were pretty secular.
No,
humanists.
Then,
I know
with all due apologies, you do not know the first thing about what secular humanism is. You should read the Secular Humanist Manifestos, because what happened in Russia, in communist countries, was an institution of a religious-like structure centered around an individual and forced atheism, none of which is consistent with humanism.
The great American philosopher Beyonce Knowles,
I don't even know what that means,
said that it has been said that racism is so American that if you challenge racism, you look like you're challenging America. We are challenging inequality. We are challenging the refusal to see me as an individual. When we overcome that...
That's not true. That's not true. Do you know why racism doesn't exist in places like or I'm not even gonna say doesn't exist, why racism isn't discussed in places like Japan or Korea or Russia. Do you know why? Because we, as black people, actually, I'm not even gonna get into that. I'm not even gonna get into it. I'm just gonna listen to this video. I'm not gonna get into it. Actually, no. We really aren't accepted in those places how we are in America. Like, you will stand out like a sore thumb if you go to those places as an African American. And that's why racism is such an American thing, I guess. I guess that's what you want to say it. I'd actually argue America is one of the least racist countries in the world. But then again, I don't really know much about history. So somebody in the comments can prove me wrong. But yeah, let's get into this.
Challenge racism, you look like you're challenging America. We are challenging inequality. We are challenging the refusal to see me as an individual. When we overcome that, have at it, we're all on equal plane.
I think it's fine. I think it's good.
The pot is getting stirred here.
So I've got a couple of questions.
So let's your side spoke, so I'm going to go to Jordan, then to you,
Let's
Michelle.
assume for a moment that I've benefited from my white privilege. Okay, so let's assume that. That's
a good
fine.
assumption.
That's what you would say. So, so let's say, here, let's get precise about this, okay?
Was that very individual of you?
Let's get precise about this, okay?
Let's get precise.
To what degree is my present level of attainment or achievement a consequence of my white privilege? And I don't mean sort of. I mean, do you mean 5%? Do you mean 15%? Do you mean 25%? Do you mean 75%? And what do you propose I do about it? How about a tax? How about a tax that's like specialized for me so that I can account for my damn privilege, so that I can stop hearing about it? Now, let's get precise about one other thing, okay? We'll get precise about one other thing. Now,
Precise?
Yeah, precise, yes. And so, if we can agree, and we haven't, that the left can go too far, which it clearly can, then how would my worthy opponents precisely define when the left that they stand for has gone too far? You didn't like equity, equality of outcome. I think that's a great marker. But if you have a better suggestion and won't sidestep the question, so let's figure out how I can dispense with my white privilege, and so that you can tell me when the left has gone too far, since they clearly can. And that's what this debate is about political correctness. It's about the left going too far. And I think it's gone too far in many ways. And I'd like to figure out exactly how and when, so the reasonable left could make its ascendance again and we could quit all this nonsense.
When you talk about, feminizing men, it almost sounds derogatory. It's almost as if you're saying that to be feminine or to express any sort of femininity is actually inferior to masculinity. And I think that is a huge problem even within the language that we use. When you say don't...
No, what? Even I'm having a little... I don't know who this is. Let me not speak too soon, because I don't know who this young woman is. I don't know what she's talking about. All I heard was feminizing men sounds derogatory. That statement alone implies that feminine men should be the norm, I guess. But that kind of goes against everything like men naturally are. Like, men naturally aren't feminine. So, of course, it would be a bad thing. Not a bad thing, but not the almost optimal thing, because if we are naturally leaning towards masculinity and we see masculinity being demonized in a certain way, yes, that's not the right thing to do. Same way if it was happening to women, if women were naturally leaning towards femininity and society was just like, no, you can't do that, you got to do this, it would be a bad thing. I think that's just the normal thing to think. That's just what it is. This is a normal thing to think.
And I think that is a huge problem even within the language that we use. When you say, don't be such a girl, don't be such a pussy, the greatest insults that men can give each other tend to have feminine origins, like, as I said, pussy or faggot, or anything like that. And I think, again, that speaks to a very systematic inequality between the genders.
And you attributed the rates of mental illness among men to their inability to express, say, sentimental emotions.
Well,
and I don't think there's a shred of clinical evidence to support that stance.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
Well, I don't think there's a shred of evidence to support that stance. The kind of violence, for example, that Lawrence is discussing is a consequence of competitive violence among young men as they move
I think there
towards.
is some evidence that men find it difficult to talk about things, and that
and they also
ways
find
in
it
which you
hard
can
to
help
reach
young
out.
men to talk about things.
And that's the evidence for the differential rates of mental health
and
suffering?
I also don't think when you're talking about things being so innate, Judith Butler would have said that, gender is a construct, that gender is a performance.
Well, Judith Butler doesn't know what she's talking about in the least, so I don't accept that.
That's interesting, but
she's no scientist. She doesn't know the psychological literature.
And this is all under the...
I don't think it's the fact that men... Of course, I do think there should be a space where men can talk about things. However, because I'm a dude, I think I'm allowed to speak on this. That's not the root cause. And I understand her. I think her intentions are very good, and I think his intentions, Jordan Peterson's, are also very good. Because this comeback was good. I think the issue comes in where a lot of this young woman, she just doesn't understand. I don't think she understands men on the level she thinks she does. I don't think men need to talk about more things. I just think the societal standards on men in general are very different and a little harder to achieve. So men don't need to talk about why they're sad. They need to fix why they're sad so they can feel less sad. That's how we think. We don't want to really talk about it. We want to fix it for the most part. Of course, it's a good to have a listening ear, but mostly we want to fix the problem. And the reason we're so sad is because we don't know how to fix the problem.
Influence, you say, of postmodernism and neo-Marxism.
Yeah,
but aren't those things two separate things?
They're completely separate. And this is something I've been criticized for. Dr. Peterson doesn't understand the difference between neo-Marxism and postmodernism. It's like, I understand the difference perfectly well. It isn't me that's conflating them. It turns out that the people who push postmodern doctrines in the university almost always ally themselves with a Marxist viewpoint. And that is logically incoherent. But I would say the postmodernists really don't give a damn for logical coherence because they regard that as part of the oppressive, patriarchal, Eurocentric view of the world. The idea that there's an objective reality and all of that, and that you can deal with it with logic. You accept this oppression narrative without question. 120 years ago...
I don't accept anything without question. I'm just telling you a fact.
That's not a fact.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Women were expected to stay home and take care of the kids and cook a meal.
Women didn't have reliable birth control until 1960. Don't you think that played a role? Don't you think the fact that they didn't have reliable care for
Are you
their
blaming women for not being allowed to lead countries, to lead nations? Because they didn't.
They were allowed to lead nations. There were queens in many countries. I think you have no idea how much this oppression narrative has saturated your thinking.
Why do you think it is that so much of what you say is so very popular with the alt-right?
It isn't. And you don't have any evidence for that at all. More than the evidence that alt-right people watch this show.
Neonite website, Saviour of Western Civilization.
Oh, well, that was all taken apart today by a number of Jewish publications, by the way, showing that, first of all, that was all satirical commentary on the part of the alt-right, directed at taking me down, for example. And there was an alt-right article yesterday published saying that I was a Jewish stooge and shill. So this is absolute nonsense, and I don't appeal primarily to the alt-right. There's no evidence for that at all. It's the proclivity of...
I never said...
I don't think Jordan Peterson appeals to any side. I think the biggest problem with Jordan Peterson is that he just thinks too much. Like he not too much, but he's a student of the world. He's a student of the world, so he doesn't really lean towards one side. He just says facts. He just says what it is, and that's the problem. Ironically, that's the problem for most people when you just say what it is. You got to kind of, I guess, sway more to one side than the other. I don't know.
I never said primarily, Jordan. What I'm interested in is why you think that you get the reaction that you do from the alt-right. Looking at, the Cathy Newman documentary.
What reaction?
Interview.
There's 10 million people watched that and commented on it.
I'm talking about what I saw, and I'm curious to know what your reaction was to the glee with which the alt-right seized upon that.
I don't accept
Should we deal with the death threats? I mean, she had, I think, a dozen
I don't accept the concept that it was the alt-right that was doing this. There were 10 million people who commented on that video, and about 95% of them commented negatively on Cathy Newman's behavior. You think there's 10 million alt-right trolls watching that?
I see very little of the pursuit of justice characterizing the modern university. I see a tremendous amount of the pursuit of vengeance for things that don't even deserve to have vengeance extracted for them.
So give me an example of what doesn't deserve vengeance.
How about the existence of the patriarchy?
But you don't mean now that women have not suffered injustices. In Britain, Virginia Woolf couldn't go to university, or rather she couldn't get a degree. Women have been excluded in all kinds of ways from social situations, have they not?
Yes, but people have been excluded from social situations in all kinds of ways. And I don't like the narrative, the social historical injustice narrative as a way of looking at the world. The way that young people now are taught about the relationships between men and women throughout history is that the fundamental narrative is that men oppressed women throughout the course of history. And then that kind of came to an end when everybody woke up in 1964.
No.
Yeah, really, that's really it.
No, listen, I don't know what it's like in Canadian universities, but that's what I call, and forgive this European reference, that's a kind of Punch and Judy way of seeing it. That is not how universities as a whole operate.
Well, that's how they operate in Canada. We had the biggest scandal in Canadian university history last year when a graduate student was hauled in front of a Maoist inquisition for daring to show a 5-minute video of me discussing issues like this on public television. The universities are in far worse shape. Maybe they're not in such bad shape in the UK as they are in North America, but they're in plenty bad shape in North America.
Forgive me, and I'm sorry you were involved, but that is not the biggest scandal.
I never really understood that. I mean, I do see, since society is in a technical patriarchy, that people would assume that the patriarchy oppresses women. As a man, I wouldn't agree to that, because I'm just looking at my own personal life. I don't oppress any women in my life. So I'm like, I wonder how that conclusion was drawn. When majority, like, I just look at how the world operates. Like, majority of people who do the jobs that nobody wants to do are men. The majority of people fighting in wars are men. So I'm like, oppression. If it was oppression, why would we... Never mind.
And I'm sorry you were involved, but that is not the biggest scandal. The biggest scandal will be the number, for instance, of suicides that are prevalent amongst undergraduates. The fact that one academic was hauled up, in my view, inappropriately for doing what was done is not the biggest scandal. You're inflating
It's
things.
not the biggest tragedy.
But
the
it's the
suicides
biggest
are a bigger tragedy, but it was certainly the biggest scandal. Canadian universities don't make international news.
Your background, it's pretty earthy, but how did you connect that with your current political perspective? What you said that you became disillusioned with socialism.
I became disillusioned with ideology.
With ideology in general.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's certainly not something that's changed. I mean, I don't like ideologues.
Well, first of all, this is my first time ever listening to no Jordan Peterson stuff. I don't really, I've heard him stuff on like TikTok and stuff like that. But if y'all have any suggestions y'all want me to check out, because I don't really know much about this area of life. I'm an engineering student in college. But yeah, leave suggestions in the comments, and yeah, see y'all later. Peace.